In an earlier series entitled Our Earthsat Saviors, we examined three categories of solutions that most experts argue will help our global civilization weather the crises of environmental degradation, food security, and the literal viability of civilization. The three categories were modernism, economic growth, and technological innovations. We found each supposed solution to be gravely inadequate, dangerous even, given our present values and beliefs. In this series of 5 videos, we explore in some depth a fourth solution proposed by numerous analysts, namely a paradigmatic shift in the collective consciousness of our species. With a shift in our values, beliefs, and behaviors, perhaps we can wisely employ the other 3 solutions for the benefit of ourselves and for all life on this planet.
Part 1. The Nature of Evolution. Imagine 2 trains running on parallel tracks. On the one train, the passengers are living longer and healthier, becoming more educated and wealthier. Technology of all sorts is becoming more sophisticated. We're becoming ever more globalized, economically, and planetary in consciousness. And therefore we know almost everything that we have ever known. That is, we can be aware of the meditation experiments of the Tibetans and Indians, and they can be aware of the scientific realizations of the West. Anyone in the world can, if somewhat globally connected, be aware of the indigenous Americans' relationship with nature, of the African concept of Ubuntu, and of the South American rites associated with ayahuasca. On the other train, there is the ongoing human population explosion, environmental destruction of global scale of oceans, forests, living creatures, atmosphere, and the cryosphere. There exists a crisis in the biospheric systems that support our civilization. As for humans themselves, there are at least 800 million people who go hungry every day, 3 billion who are malnourished, some 1.5 billion who do not have potable water or proper sanitation. So that despite all that we have taken from the earth, and all that we have trashed in our attempt to provide for comfortable, happy lives, and all the innovations, globalization, etc., we still haven't been able to even feed all of our human family. Never mind provide a minimally acceptable standard of living. About 1.5 billion people live below the World Bank's dubious $1.25 a day poverty line. Some 3 to 4 billion live at less than $4 a day. The train metaphor isn't the best because their 2 trajectories are not separate, but rather they are intertwined. In a previous presentation of this website, Our Earthsat Saviors, we followed the logic of the supposed solutions to our dilemma. We found that each, modernism, economic development, and technological innovation, have quote-unquote side effects so serious that these supposed solutions are not mitigating our condition, but rather hastening the demise of global civilization. Being a clever species, we have devised and imagined all sorts of solutions for our problems. The problem with our solutions is that they're all over the map. Each clever solution counters another one. For instance, while many intelligent, highly educated people see that governments clearly must tax and legislate against behaviors it wants to discourage, and subsidize and legislate for those it wants to encourage, there are many equally intelligent and highly educated others who see just as clearly that businesses work best in unregulated markets, that inefficient as free markets appear, they are actually, given all other options, the most efficient and effective mechanisms for significant change. We seem to be at ideological loggerheads. So how can we determine what is the correct course of action? We can resort to disparaging our ideological opposites, but that is not helpful. We no longer have time for that sort of self-indulgent argumentation. We need more than mere cleverness, more than shrewd logical arguments, however well constructed, however well intentioned. Likely, our flaw is not the constraints to our cleverness, but rather the assumptions upon which all our thinking, reasoning, and argumentation are based. Most people, in the West at least, position themselves somewhere along a 2-dimensional political left-right spectrum, then spend a lifetime digging themselves ever more deeply into their entrenched positions, finding every piece of evidence to justify this position, which ultimately is based less on reality and more on some sort of personal proclivity. However, our worldviews are actually far more similar than they are different. Our differences tend to be mostly ornamental. Whether we live in Beirut, Tokyo, or Brussels, we all basically want to live comfortable, secure lives based, whether we realize it or not, on an agricultural and industrial platform. If Albert Einstein was right when he noted we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them, then we will have to change our kind of thinking, our worldview. Arguably, our two biggest problems or challenges are 1. The global environment is changing in ways that are unfriendly to humans, and 2. Our civilization must endure in the face of these environmental changes. These two problems have been created by the same thinking that brought us the wonders of civilization: long, comfortable lives, lots of labor-saving devices, big cars and buildings and hospitals and museums and so on. So there are not two separate trains running parallel, there is one, and it is speeding down the track with all that we consider good and all that we consider bad. A fourth savior has been proposed by some luminaries, namely a paradigm shift on a global scale, a shift in our worldviews, a shift in consciousness and in culture. As attractive as this idea is, and as popular as it indeed seems to be, if internet discourse is any indication, there has been so far a big problem with even discussing consciousness shift as a solution. And this is it. Where we otherwise can come off so clear, specific, and reasonable in conversation, when we speak of a paradigm shift or an evolution in our consciousness, we can suddenly come off vague, simplistic, and, well, woo-woo. As a result, we quickly lose our audience. So let us examine this notion of the evolution of consciousness. Let us look as clearly and honestly as we can. Our first step will be to examine the idea of evolution itself. Evolution was a pattern discovered by numerous biologists, most famously Charles Darwin, to describe the transfer of traits down the generations and the incremental changes in those traits. We've since recognized the pattern in many systems. We have recognized that the universe itself has been evolving for the past 14 billion years. It has grown ever more complex, going, for example, from a soup of subatomic particles to including galaxies, stars, planets, complex molecules, life, and self-awareness. The Milky Way galaxy has evolved through the many billions of years. Our solar system for about 4.5 billion years. The Earth for those same 4.5 billion years. And single-celled life for at least 3.5 billion years. And all these have become more complex over time. Multicellular organisms came on the scene about 800 million years ago. Animals with a backbone about 530 million years ago. 225 million years ago evolved the first mammals. Perhaps some 65 million years ago came primates. Then about 15 million years ago, the great apes or hominidae, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, humans, and bonobos. The evolution of upright hominids took some few million years. Starting about 4 million years ago, our ancestors were from a genus called Australopithecus. The genus Homo began around 2.3 million years ago, and surprise, surprise, also evolved. Homo means human, or man. The word human has the same derivation as humus, of the earth, from an early Proto-Indo-European language. There is so much overwhelming evidence for biological evolution that it remains one of the great triumphs of science as a way of understanding reality. One of the important developments among animals was increasing encephalization, that is, the increase of brain size in comparison to body size, and an increasing complexity in the network of brain cells. In the past 6 million years, the evolution of our direct ancestors has gone through remarkable changes. For one, skeletal structure, bones of feet, legs, pelvis, etc., are of a hominid that stood increasingly more upright and could move well bipedally. Also, a rapid increase in cranial capacity, therefore increased brain size, therefore increased mental abilities. And technology begins with simple tools and fire and becomes increasingly more complex. Some 200,000 years ago, our direct ancestors became anatomically the same as we are today. 70,000 years or so, there was a huge leap, it seems, manifesting as the emergence of a sophisticated culture, which has been interpreted to mirror a huge leap in the way the neurons in our brain had become recently reconnected. Genetic change can proceed only as fast as the succession of generations. It may take many generations, for instance, for a population of black-furred fox to evolve into white-furred fox. Cultural changes, on the other hand, occur much faster. Information can be immediately communicated and imitated from person to person. It is passed vertically down the generations and horizontally to one's contemporaries. So, once one member of the human community discovers white fur, everyone can soon be wearing white fur. And so of all our adaptations, our species' single greatest adaptive feature is our very ability to rapidly adapt to change. Our ancestors were African creatures. As the northern continents underwent cycles of glaciation and melting, the climate of Africa changed back and forth, from dry to wet and back again. To survive, our ancestors had to adapt to the oscillating conditions. Brain complexity increased. The neocortex, the outer, newest part of the mammal brain, became denser with nerve cells. Innovations developed with accelerating rapidity. Innovations in technology, in behavior, and in social organization. Language, art, and jewelry became an integral part of human culture. At the same time, around 70,000 years ago, humans began migrating to all parts of the world. In doing so, we met even more diverse environments to which we had to adapt, and we did it pretty successfully. We became more numerous and rapidly inhabited all the Earth's environments, not just the savannas, but the coasts, the deserts, forests, jungles, mountains, rivers, far-off islands, and polar regions. Our evolution continued, accelerated even. Genetic changes coded for skin color, eye color, hair color and texture, lactose tolerance, and at least 100 other significant characteristics. Less than 3,000 years ago, for instance, a group of Han Chinese migrated into the Tibetan Plateau. DNA mutations that coded for increased red blood cell production provided a successful adaptation to the decreased oxygen of high elevations. Societies changed even faster than our biology, as did technology and innovation, in architecture and clothes, the ways we fed ourselves and what we ate. To summarize, evolution seems to be an inherent pattern to the universe. It unfolds like a flower. What manifests seems to come from already embedded patterns and universal laws, to use a less than perfect word. Yet, given the complexity of this universe, and given the limitations of our understanding about nature, perhaps limitations we will never transcend, it is difficult, if not impossible, to predict what will next emerge. Still, we recognize certain features of reality's evolution. Properties and behaviors become increasingly complex. For example, protons and electrons, to atoms, to molecules and compounds, to cells, tissues, and organs. Life and consciousness are some of the latest properties to emerge in this universe. What exists and persists does so because it is successful in its environment. It is adaptive in the language of biological evolution. In a sense, the environment selects what is possible. Whatever comes into existence and persists also affects its environment. This is equally true of electrons, microbes, and humans, of course. We constantly change the very environment to which we have to adapt. Change, or impermanence, Nietzsche in the Pali language, is a feature of the universe, and the rate at which change occurs seems to be accelerating.